Hello, Wynshel. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for giving up time to come and tell us about your experiences with Machinima.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Right, the first question I'd like to ask then is, have you ever created a Machinima?
Yes, I have. I've created several machinimas, and I think that uh, probably at least a dozen, not nearly as many as some of my friends, but I have created between 12 and 20 machinimas.
Wow. And do you use them in your teaching?
Yes, I do. I often use them as teaching tools for instructional purposes, and I also use them as tools to involve my students in the actual making of the machinima.
Ah, now that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. So would you tell us just a little bit about how you involve your students then?
Well, I started out just having them plan and become the actors, and lately we've been getting more interested in having a technical person actually make the videos. If we have one of the technical students step up as a team leader, then the other students can work in the planning stages and in the acting stages. So it can be a complete experience when we use it in that way.
Oh, wow, that sounds really exciting. How long do you think the ideal machinima should be then?
It seems to me that somewhere between 2 minutes and 3 minutes. I know sometimes they're a bit longer, but it seems that 2 to 3 minutes keeps everyone busy. The project's not too big, not overwhelming, and it also is the perfect length for capturing users' experiences too.
Yes, thank you. That's interesting. Now, I think you're an English language teacher. Do you see a big use for machinima in language teaching?
I absolutely do. And I think one of the things I noticed is the level of engagement's much higher. When students know they're going to be recorded, that their work's going to be published, for some reason they come in it to a very real experience, and the dedication and motivation is much higher in these projects.
There's one query I've got for you. There seems to be quite a lot of chat about this at the moment. So, do you think text added to machinima for language learning is useful?
I think it's absolutely useful. There's just something about having the text right in front of you that the students can read. For example, they can actually read the dialogue, and other students can follow it as well in case there are some pronunciation issues or if they can't understand perfectly. It can almost be seen as peer teaching because students are watching other students perform well, and I think it serves as its own teaching tool for that reason. Uh, Also, the students can sort of reinforce the language that they worked on for so long, and sort of see everything in the context in which they're speaking. And also, sometimes they're not listening to themselves as much when they're recording, and it gives them a chance to go and see, remember what they said in text, and listen to their voices as well.
That's very interesting. So, they're revising or listening to what they've said and perhaps revising their pronunciation on the strength of it. Wow.
It's almost the more important aspect of it in some ways because I felt the students were making some they were very aware of what they needed to improve, and I was really surprised by that.
Interesting. Are there specific things that a teacher needs to keep in mind when making a machinima for classroom use?
Yes, I think first of all, we can use it in the digital classroom when teaching online. That works. Giving a link, for example, to a student, having the students go off and watch a machinima, or in the classroom, if you have one-to-one computers, doing the same thing, or having the whole class watch it. If you only have one computer in the class, having the whole class watch it. if you're using it for a teaching tool, and I did actually begin using Machinima because the students watched it and I felt they were watching my grammar lessons in Machinima much more than they were listening to me. So I felt that they had a stronger awareness of what I was saying. They they were glued to the Machinima. They were taking notes. And when I talk to them, when I stand in front of the classroom and talk to them about grammar points or things that are kind of difficult to teach, I can just see they're not listening to me or they're not engaged. And I really watched them while they were watching these machinimas, and they felt they were responsible for the content. So all of a sudden the pencils were coming out in the paper, and I could tell even if we were in an online classroom, they were reading from their notes. And I thought, this is fabulous because I first of all started teaching the first, second, and third conditionals. That was my first experience because I felt it was an interesting way to teach something that was kind of traditionally difficult or not interesting to students. So it's fine once they have the grammar base doing the activities. There are many activities we can do, and there are many exercises. There's no shortage of those in the three conditionals. But explaining the grammar was just deadly boring. And we saw this incredible avoidance phenomenon when we were looking at the third conditional because students just never used it. So that was my challenge, was to break through to some of these areas that students were avoiding tremendously. And third conditional was one of them. So I had their full attention during the grammar presentation part of the lesson. And they were responsible for teaching me the grammar instead
Wow.
of me teaching them. So it was a big eye opener for me. And I thought, oh, I'm doing this from now on. Forget the grammar. I'm not talking to them anymore. They're watching machinimas.
Teaching you the grammar. That sounds
And
fantastic.
they were not very good machinimas, and they still aren't. But my students love them. So that's another thing, uh,
Ah,
is
well,
you have the students' attention. Hmm.
that actually comes on to our last point, because our last point is, do you have any tips for teachers who would like to make machinima?
Yes, lots. Well, first of all, my biggest thing is to sort of be able to live with some of the imperfections because they're very imperfect. They'll always be imperfect. We're not filmmakers, we're teachers. And I really try to encourage my grad students who are making machinimas to just make a short machinima. The project should not be big and overwhelming or you'll never do it. I'm really for beginning a project and ending it as quickly as possible so you can become extremely fluent in the process. And that way machinimas will get done, they'll get finished, and your students will love them whether they're perfect or not. My students loved my most technically boring and head talking sort of machinimas, but they really loved them. So I felt that was really important.
That's amazing. So the quality, they don't have to be fantastic quality and very, very highly skilled teachers, as long as they just get their ideas on to video.
Yes. Yes, and sometimes it took me a long time. I had to learn to be comfortable with imperfections in sound because my students very often came to the classroom with a lot of imperfections. And I just couldn't control that. It took me, first I started using Machinima as an instructional tool, and I was making it and controlling it and really adamant about, that it be good, have good pedagogy, good sound and everything. But then I realized that I can't control that all the time, and it's much more important to sort of get through the process of making lots of machinimas until you feel comfortable. And then when you're making them with students, you just have to kind of go with a good day. Some days are good, some days are bad. Some machinimas are wonderful accidents because the sound was perfect one day, but you can't really let that sound stop you because it's always going to be a problem until we get past this technical purgatory.
Yeah, very, very good point. Okay, well, thank you very, very much for all your hints and tips. They're absolutely wonderful, and I hope they will inspire lots of teachers to get on and try. Thanks ever so much.
You're certainly welcome.